What I wanted to talk about today was the importance of opening to a feeling, because this is really important and it's so counter to what we normally do in our daily lives. We have a difficult feeling, we're in a difficult situation, and all we want to do is get rid of it, basically. And the means that we adopt to get rid of the feeling range from all kinds of entertainment, TV, stimulus, drugs, alcohol, workaholism, all these activities which develop very quickly into forms of addiction, relationship addiction, trying to control our circumstances, trying to control people around us, blaming people, arguing with people, living in the future or living in the past. These are all ways that bring us out of our present experience. That's what they all have in common. These are all ways that I call self-rejecting. What all these different ways have, these self-rejecting ways have, is that they're blocking us from our inner feeling experience. And that blocking is the self-rejection that I'm referring to. It means that we're pushing away a part of ourselves. But we assume that the part of ourselves that we're experiencing, the uncomfortable part, is the part that should be pushed away. And that's why we do it, without really knowing any better. But this is what psychology has evolved over the past 80 years or so. It's the realization that we can't push these feelings away. If we try to push them away, they just become suppressed. And then what happens is, when you go into therapy, if you do go into therapy, what happens is that you make the attempt with the therapist to bring up these feelings again for experience, because they were pushed away originally. Now, what's important to realize here is that I'm talking about the feelings that you're experiencing today. This very situation that you're in right now with this person, in this relationship, in this romantic relationship, in this work relationship. These are the feelings that you need to work on. And working on them, the first step is the taking responsibility for them, knowing that the feelings are within. The second step is ceasing the resistance to the feeling. Now, another way to look at this is the dualistic kind of way in which we understand that our perception of life is what we call dualistic. Our perception on the material plane is basically dualistic, meaning that we have to have a sensation of opposites in order to have any kind of perception at all. So on the physical level, we perceive hot and cold, we perceive up and down, we have solid and soft. These are actually complementary qualities of the physical universe. We couldn't know one without the other. And on the emotional level, what happens is that we have the exact same kind of experience. It's a dualistic experience. We have basically happiness and sadness. We have aloneness. We have togetherness. We have fulfillment. We have lack of recognition. We have security. We have fear. Now, it's important to realize that we can't have any of these feelings without the other, that the so-called negative is an important part of the total experience. And this is what the East refers to as yin-yang. The light and the dark go together. There's no having one without the other. But we don't understand this, and we make the very natural mistake of trying to push away what we perceive to be the negative. But as we push it away, as we resist the experience, it becomes suppressed, it builds, it becomes more painful than if we were to just experience it, open to it, and be done with it. See, yin-yang doesn't mean that half of our experience has to be unhappy by any means. It just means that if you can open to the negative when it occurs, you open to it in such a very definite way that you're clearing those feelings in a very short amount of time, and then you're free to go on and remain balanced in your life. It's not that you have to be dealing with these negative feelings all the time. Once you open to them and clear them, they're gone, and you're able to be fulfilled, to be happy. But as we don't realize that the positive and negative, so-called, go together, what we do is resist the negative and then form a compulsive attachment for the positive. And this is a trap that we fall into really easily. If we've got a lot of suppressed loneliness, we become compulsive about finding the person to be with, about finding the right person, thinking that the right person will solve our loneliness. But that's not really what happens. And many of us have had experiences that have shown us that going for the person outside of ourselves is not going to solve the loneliness inside. We have to deal with it directly and open to it directly. Now, the rejection of the negative takes a lot of really subtle forms. In a religious sense, it becomes the notion of God versus the devil. And people fall into fighting with the negative, what they think is the negative, thinking that they're being very godly, very religious, and all that does is strengthen the negative. See, when you fight the negative, it strengthens it, in whatever form this negative is taking in your life. And this is why it's so hard to understand when we're living in an age of confrontation and standing up for your rights and trying to make definite changes in the world. You know, the spiritual aspects of what we're doing, there's a lack of spiritual vision connected with this. There's a lack of understanding what acceptance is all about and why it's important, and how fighting what's outside yourself, if you're doing it in the wrong way, if you're doing it blindly, if you're making the assumption that your experience, if you make the assumption that you're a victim, basically, and that you're at the mercy of circumstances outside yourself, you're giving away your power. And fighting the circumstances outside yourself, even to make the most productive changes and positive appearing changes, it's still fighting outside yourself. It's still strengthening that thing outside yourself. It's still not taking responsibility for your own experience within, for not clearing that experience within, and then having the external around you just change automatically, because that's what happens. As soon as you change the experience, as soon as you change your inner experience by processing and clearing feelings, what's happening around you changes automatically. You no longer have the need for those circumstances, for those people to be acting on you in the way they are to bring up the feelings that you're dealing with. But in order to reach that point, you have to move into an acceptance of those feelings. You have to realize that much of our behavior is based on resisting our feelings. And moving into a positive emotional health starts with the acceptance of the perceived negative, even if it's the loneliness, even if it's the pain, even if it's the fear. And the way you can do this on a practical level is just, I know this is difficult to understand in a very complete way, so that's why we'll be discussing it in more depth throughout the series of programs, and that's why I wrote the book about it, basically. My book, Emotional Clearing, is to try to explain on a deep level what these concepts are, how to use them in practical ways. But for now, the important thing is to recognize that it's opening to the feeling that's been suppressed in the past, that's accumulated, that you need to release through the acceptance and then the experience. So I'd like to leave you with that thought, and perhaps during the week you can sit quietly with yourself. Try to look at how you react to your feelings, how you are pushing your feelings away, resisting your feelings with any particular kind of mode of behavior, such as blaming, such as living in the future, or the numerous addictions that we today are involved in.